And I decided to, and I decided
Beautiful.
to use that as my background.
Beautiful. Well, you don't you haven't aged a bit less.
No, I don't want to, I refuse. So next week on February 9th, Marilyn and I will be celebrating our 67th anniversary.
Wow.
Wow.
Well
Wow.
done.
Congratulations.
So,
When
That's
did
fantastic.
yes, and the
I-
amazing thing is we're still in love with each other. So that's marvelous.
That's a plus.
Even better.
Were you like 5 when you got married?
yeah, yes,
Four,
thank you.
4.5.
Thank
It was betrothed before we were born, actually.
you.
The matchmaker worked.
God, I thought we were doing well at 33. You've doubled that score.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
August
Well,
will be
fantastic.
56. August will be 56 for us.
Wow.
Wow.
Hmm.
That's a lot too, Rick.
Yeah.
That's nothing to sneeze at.
One at a time.
So how are you going to catch up to Les? That's the question, right?
1 year at a time.
It's awesome.
Oh, this is great. Wow. So when are you going back to Asia there, Les?
Well, I unfortunately had spinal surgery, which wound up being very, very bad. And my ability to walk has been decreased a great deal. And so I have a bunch of pain management doctors and other people who I'm talking to about getting the spinal thing taken care of.
Good.
It's really put a giant crush on my life. So I walk now with a cane, unfortunately. And there are 2 doctors that I'm honing in on who will not do surgery, but have other methods of quelling the pain. So that's holding up my life.
Got it. Okay.
Our one of our son-in-laws is actually Marilyn and I turned down an invitation from one of our son-in-laws who is building a house in Big Island, and he wanted to see the progress. And this weekend we were supposed to go, and unfortunately we turned it down because of the health situation. No, we're not in wheelchairs. We're not in any of that stuff whatsoever. It's just painful.
Yeah, yeah. Well, can you take a cruise to the Big Island? Just kidding.
That's not a bad idea.
Oh, okay, okay. Well, there you go. Well, thanks for jumping on there, Les, and thanks everyone for being here today. And we will start the fireside chat. So, Chris Vidic, are you on? I don't see Chris.
I am. I'm just.
Oh, sorry, you're not on video. That's fine. Okay.
Here we go.
Okay, great. Thank you, Chris.
Sure.
So Chris has been fortunate enough to be available to do this week's fireside chat. Eric Kraft got pulled away at the last minute, and Chris is doing a lot with his firm with AI, and he's always a visionary as to when things are happening in the market. So looking forward to what you're sharing today, Chris.
Thanks. Thanks.
And Laura, kudos on your fireside chat just an hour ago. Nice job.
Thanks. It was great to be with Nancy and do the kickoff for Ask the Consultant. So
yes, and thank you for mentioning SCTC about 100 times.
Of course, always will. They're always in my heart.
Yes, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. So yeah, today is again fireside chat number 180. Okay, the real AI in the 2024 CX market. Again, Chris will hone in on some specifics here. So let me start with a poll real quick. Come on, where are you? Polls. Here we go. So here. So first question is, just a choice of one. Are business leaders worried about their company is missing out on generative AI benefits? Yes, no, possibly, and yeah, I really don't care. Throwing a little humor in there. And if anybody votes number 4, I'm going to call on you. And I know Chris will comment on that in a little while. So, okay, well, let me just stop the poll. Thanks, everyone. And let me just take a quick screenshot. And I will share the results.
No, it's not.
Unless you're on, oh, here, I can mute him. Okay. So, yeah, so the results are possibly number 3 wins, followed by yes, and then followed by no. So there were actually 2 no's, and Chris, I'm sure you'll be able to comment on that, you know, as we go through this. So let me just go back to one more. And this is, so pick your top, actually it was supposed to be pick your top 2 here. So chatbots are working, chatbots are clunky. CX has gone down in the last 12 months. CX has gone up in the last 12 months. AI is in a hype cycle, and ChatGPT is the answer. Pick your top 2, please.
Steve, for me, the poll disappeared from my screen.
Really?
Okay.
Really? Okay, you guys, I didn't see anybody. Hold on. Yeah, so there's nothing
we
here.
go.
Let me stop the share. Oh,
Oh,
now you
it
can
went
see
away
it.
again.
Oh, hold on.
Playing hard to get.
No, but it's like it's finished. Let me start it again. Let me see if I can start this again. Hold on. I got to relaunch it. Okay. Yes, I want to relaunch this poll, please. Can you see it now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So number 1, chatbots are working, or 2, they're clunky, not working. CX has gone down in the last 12 months or has gone up, or AI is in a hype cycle, or ChatGPT is the answer. Pick your top 2, please. And how are things
Again,
in Virginia
question
today?
4, Steve, question 4 is kind of
Oh, sorry. I meant going up. I
Hobson's
apologize.
choice. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry. I didn't get rid of the rest of the original sentence. Sorry about that. So, Rick, how are things in Virginia today?
Sunny, about 50 degrees,
Oh, okay, good.
drizzling rain on and off,
Oh, okay.
washing all the snow away. That's good.
Yeah. There you go. Okay. Yeah, I'm down in Georgia and I'm hiding in the bedroom at the moment. So, okay. Well, thanks everybody for, let me stop the poll and let me, again, just take a quick snapshot here and I will share the results with you. Okay. Okay. Not now, Blair. Sorry. Ask me again, Blair, in a few minutes. Okay. So, share the results, and you can see that between AI being in a hype cycle and chatbots being clunky, those are the winners here, followed by, interestingly, number 3, CX has gone down. Actually, a couple of people has gone up, and chatbots are working, and then no one answered on ChatGPT is the answer. Wow, that's very interesting. Well, again, Chris, I'm sure that will help you as you go through this. So thanks, everybody, for that. And let me stop the share here. So let me continue here. So a big thank you to Dave Michaels for sharing talking points last week. His trends and his predictions are, I think, just some of the best out there. You know, Dave just does a lot of research, and I was grabbing onto almost every talking point. He actually went 5 minutes over, and I wish I could have had him on for a full 16 minutes beyond that, if there was that much info. So big thank you to Dave. Quick quote, I should say: the Americans have the need for the telephone, but we do not. We have plenty of messenger boys. Okay, and I won't ask you who did that, but that was William Priest, the British Post Office in 1876. So obviously he was right. Okay. So, Dave Clardy, over to you.
Hey, well, thank you, Steve. I
Sure.
just want to remind all the VAC members that and consultants that we have launched our recruitment contest. And if you need more information and you did not see Mr. Vondro's email yesterday, please reach out to me. We want to make a concerted effort to ensure that not only the consultant community, but the VAC community is well aware of this contest. And, you know, our goal here is to up our membership and be a stronger and more internationally focused organization moving forward. So thanks for the time today, Steve, and look forward to today's presentation.
Thank you, Dave. Mike, are you on by chance? I know you were running a little bit behind a little earlier. Okay, so Chuck, let me skip over to you here.
Right. As Dave mentioned, one of the poll questions should have been, are you interested in seeing the SCTC grow as an organization, yes or no? My guess is most of us would vote yes. And to that end, another poll question that Steve asked a while back was, do you know consultants that qualify for the SCTC but are not currently members? A lot of folks said yes. Well, being wizards that we are, we put 2 and 2 together and said, wait a minute, we all know people that aren't members. We need more members. Let's get them on board. I think there was a sales contest 10, 15 years ago, Top Dog or something or other before my time. We're going to do another one. I presume everybody got the listserv email I sent out. It is intended to go to VAC members as well. Dave, did you get yours? Did it?
I did, Steve.
Okay. So anyway, it's a lot of fun. I won't waste your time repeating what's in the email. If you didn't get it, we'll send another one out through Cap Hill. But it's going to be a fun contest. It's going to run April and May. We're going to try to recruit as many new members as we can. Our goal is 20 new members. And it's going to be a lot of fun. We're offering a promotion. If you're on the winning team, you're going to get a nice gift courtesy of Vern at Jabra. But you need to let us know that you're in or not in. We're not just going to assume you want to participate, but in order to win, you got to play. So respond to Barb if you want in. We're going to divide up into teams, and we're going to go off and have some fun. Thanks, everybody.
Well, thank you, Chuck. I appreciate it. So one more announcement, and Enterprise Connect is coming up on March 25th through 28th. I was actually looking at the hotel last night, the Gaylord Palms, and it's already sold out. A lot of the hotels in the area have bumped up their rates by at least 50 to 70%, knowing that Enterprise Connect is coming that week. They've got some very specific tracks on AI, data and analytics, employee experience, vertical industry focus. They got a lot of end users coming this year, and communications and collaboration 2027. So should be a great conference. I will be there. Many of us will be there, but encouraging all of us to attend if you can be there. It's a very big conference, and we're expecting actually a larger turnout even this year. So Chris, with that, I'm going to stop my share and I'm going to give the screen over to you. Okay.
All right. Let me,
Hey, Fran. There's no
Hi, Steve.
no drinking contest this week, huh?
No, no drinking this week.
Okay.
Next week.
Gotcha.
okay.
Last week though. Oh wow. Last week was amazing. The people in this organization are just wonderful. The last 2 sessions, we're just realizing how nice everybody is, how thoughtful they are. It's really incredible. And Vern's smiling because he finished us off last week and it was amazing.
It was fun.
People.
Good group.
That's great.
Good group.
Okay, Chris, take it. Thank you, Fran and Vern.
Okay.
Okay, Chris, you're all set.
Yeah, thanks again. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. 2 things. One, Steve, the hotel, the Gaylord was sold out the week after last year. I called and tried to make a reservation, so you got to do it while you're down there. So that's my only advice. And Chuck, I did not get a email from you, so if you could check that and see how we might communicate better. But thank you again for everybody being here, and thanks for the opportunity. This is sort of an update from last year. Nothing really, nothing else. I mean, you see a lot of the headlines in the news. Our business is changing more slowly than than the hype, right? So that's pretty clear. We do see a lot, and just in general, I would say the two industries we see adoption in are insurance and healthcare. Financials just, sitting on the fence. I think that's probably got more to do with weakness in the banking sector and some of the unusual reserve issues that were imposed on the banking system as a result of Silicon Valley Bank. But so that's what we're seeing generally in our operations. We're seeing a little bit of retail adoption, but really healthcare and insurance are leading the way. So those are just general comments there. Let me just, and this is not advancing. Let me see. Here we go. This is some of the stuff. The survey, I think, that covered some of this. Speaking of hype cycle, I think we're really in this trough, and I think there's good evidence to that. But the interesting part is it's easy to get into this. It's kind of difficult to finish it, and I'll give you some understanding of that later on. So that'll show up in the slides as we move through. So let me just hit this first. Sort of, state of where we are, what we're working with. Some of this analysis is the Hugging Face. You see the comment there, or the footnote. GPT-4. This was done in October. October 31st is when it was published. You can see GPT-4 is pretty much outperforming everything else that was out there at that moment. And we're seeing that, quite honestly, personally, or with our business. If you're not using GPT-4 Turbo, your response times are, incrementally longer than if you were to use GPT-4 Turbo. It's not to say that the others won't catch up. This business, it's such a quick cycle. I would say 6 to 9 months, you'll see these performance levels all pretty much balance out across the board, right? So nothing really kind of unusual there. Google and Meta, they're really sort of starting to get into it. I think that they're using it for their own purposes more than they're trying to sell a product at this point, as opposed to seeing Microsoft selling a product, right? So I think Google, we've had some good success with it with some of the customers, and it's simply because they're wedded to a Google stack, and they figured they'd start there first. And I've got more about that, how to start there first, and what we're seeing out there in a minute.
So Chris, let me just interrupt for a quick second. You had mentioned when we spoke the other day, you're starting to see major enterprises not just be interested in AI, but actually planning on it this year to implement, right? At least some form of it, right?
Yeah, and that's so. I mean, here's the truth of our system of governments in American business, right? Board of directors last year, for I would say 95% of the employees out there, approved budget for AI this year. And if they don't get something on AI by November, December, they're going to find a new leader for that company. So the executive management level has got a mandate this year to go ahead with some form of implementation. It might be just a pilot program, right? Some of these folks are scared to death of it, for everything from regulatory to privacy. But the reality is that this year, we are seeing people actively saying, yeah, I want to take a meeting about AI. These are our goals, right? And it's happening in a big way for us. So that's a comment there, Steve. And to go along with that, and just to try to get back into the rhythm here, we're seeing that this Q thing that's out there in play. That's when that comes out, that's gonna have probably as much of an impact to the marketplace as ChatGPT did. So, and that's a Elon Musk funded adventure that's pretty much on its way at this point. They're continuing to try to build it to be able to show differences between where they are and where ChatGPT is, right? Everybody's active in the business. We have done a decent amount of work with Anthropic, only because it works, right? So, I mean, it's early on chatbots that we built. Some customers adopted it. We've got it in some of our demos, and Amazon and IBM are pretty much, they're coming to market a little bit slower than everybody else. And I shouldn't say that. They're going to make their market splashes this year with new product and new services and solutions. So I don't want to minimize, Amazon, IBM, Microsoft. I mean, these are your major players, and Google. They're major players in this business. Some, there'll be a mid-market group like Anthropic that'll become big as well. I think we'll have plenty of competition in the marketplace, although it's really about speed and scale for us. So a little bit different story than some others. We're seeing AI up here. It's showing up in all kinds of analytics and network monitoring tools and so on. We're not. I mean, we have part of that business, but it's sort of a natural evolution. People aren't jumping, say, into a technology with, say, a pilot program just to test out, AI simulations of network behavior, right? So, but it's out there, right? So, my focus is on contact center, so that's really what my perspective is, right? So, current vendors, the back-end APIs on their machines, I think saying they're a mess is a little bit of an overstatement, so I apologize for that. There are some that are just non-existent, so choose wisely as you work through that. So some just don't. They're relying on traditional CTI integration methodologies to be able to integrate, and that's okay, right? So, but it's not something that they can publish and well, I shouldn't say publish, but it's not like they're publishing a specific API for the AI solutions. CRMs, we're seeing. I haven't seen a single customer that can run their entire contact center on just one CRM system. So there's always other systems that come into play. So we'll have to see how that plays out. You can see my big quote here from Salesforce down the bottom. That correlates with with a survey that Steve just did. I think that's 9%, so 91% would somewhat agree with this statement. So,
that's a big statement, because that means clients, prospects are ready to talk about it.
Right,
and it's got to be part of the conversation, right?
Right, and they're worried because their board said do something, right?
Yeah.
So and they got to figure out what to do, and it's it's across the board. There's they don't know. I mean, these are with due respect to our executive leadership, most of our corporations, their ability to be visionaries is limited by the amount of decisions they have to make on a day-to-day basis about operations. So it's going to be a battle for that. Can they simplify that with AI? And the answer is yes. They don't know that. They just don't. I think it's just one more thing to spend money on and get marginal results, because that's the way they're driven, right? That's the way they manage. knowledge management systems, there's around now, there's a couple decent integrations in our portfolio, and we rep just about everybody's stuff. So, from that perspective, it's not really earth shaking, right? The knowledge management just has not been a core competency of the traditional contact center group. Interesting, some of the, I don't want to call out the vendor, but we're getting vendors where in the config file you can do a check mark, and now you've got AI, so to speak, because it'll do a summary of every conversation. Well, yeah, that's great, but it's check mark. I mean, how do I tune this thing? And I'll get more into some of those issues later on. How do I tune it? How do I maintain it? What happens when I get a new version? All that stuff plays into it. So we're seeing traditional vendors, they're exposing some functionality. Some of it's vaporware, some of it's not. So that's sort of my general comment there. Microsoft, the hardware market is, and full disclosure, I'm an NVIDIA and Intel investor. So with that being said, Microsoft's using their own chips. It's kind of cool here. I don't know if you can see this, but you can see the copper tubing for the water cooling system here for their racks. It's a vertical rack, which is a little bit unusual, but it's 128 cores.
How's it going? Last name's French.
Steve, can you handle that? Or?
Yeah, I did. I think.
Okay. Thanks. NVIDIA is going to continue to be in the game in a very big way. Intel, everybody's announced an architecture to support AI. Most interestingly, down at the desktop level. That will be a fascinating distributed discussion, and certainly it would meet a very grand amount of scale. So, but Intel, NVIDIA, ADM, Broadcom, they're all in the game. So we're going to see a little bit different. Some of these are going to be tuned to certain ways that certain solutions work, right? I mean, Microsoft's building this and in firmware building commands that are embedded within that platform. Will that Microsoft chip run, say, Google solution as well as it does ChatGPT? The answer is probably never, right? So as you go through this and you look at hardware versus software and hosted solutions and so on, right now everything's predominantly in the cloud. You can buy this stuff, but it's pretty expensive to put inside your firewall. Any thoughts on that? Any thoughts on hardware at this point?
No, but it brings up a good point about commercial availability. How about AI impersonating? For lack of a better word, there's a big concern about that in general, right? Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts on that?
When they build these, right now they've got enough processor power and they can virtualize it, and it's running in a reasonable fashion for what I would call industry. Okay, so we're getting sub-second response times on some things. Sometimes it's 3 seconds, 4 seconds. Is that good enough for voice? The answer is maybe, right? So you've got to put some comfort tones in there, or some comfort sound, if you will, to let people know that the thing's still working, right? If you do a voice interface, and like I said, you'll see sometimes 2 or 3 or 4 second delays if you've got a complex question, right? Especially if you've got to discern 2 or 3 different. If you say you're calling up and to reschedule an appointment, and you say something like, tomorrow I've got a doctor's appointment. I don't think I can be here. can we reschedule something for Thursday or Friday? Being able to say something like to a machine and get a reasonable response within 3 seconds is pretty cool, right? But in some cases it's not fast enough, right?
Right.
So, but these processors will just enhance that. And it's, you know, it's just like anything, processor or memory, it's limited. So, we've kind of looked at this from a non-invasive perspective. You can build around existing contact centers, right? In terms of adding functionality through traditional CTI-based solutions, you can synchronize information, whether it be an assistant element that may come to bear after a fact GPT or a fact type questioning process. You know, so it's not overly difficult to visualize this architecture. It's different in each case. In some cases, you're going to need to license some CTI stubs on the switch to be able to synchronize things if you don't already own it, or if you own a limited number of interfaces and you need more. You know, certainly there's a license model there for that. This really kind of begs some questions about, like, who's going to do this, right? So, you know, I don't see certain vendors having a services support operation be able to do this, beyond possibly some, you know, premier customers or something like that. I mean, they're not built to scale around that, right? So they've got to rely on their partners. You know, we're even limited in terms of what we've got access to, and then we're constantly looking for good people to fill those gaps. So the answer is, this is a, you know, we can integrate with a traditional infrastructure without a lot of trouble. Okay. Now I want to dive into something that's a little bit different in terms of market perspective, and what parts are easy and what parts are hard. Before I do that, any questions?
I think you're stunning our group there, Chris.
Okay. I'm boring them all. I'm putting everybody to sleep. Yeah. Sorry about that.
Not
you
at
know,
all.
need a nap. I understand it. So,
Well, no, but let me ask you, within this chart, right? Sorry, just go back. So you were talking about, you know, the chat widget, right? So I think, you know, one of the things that I see, you know, consistently as a patient or as a customer is that I'm not really seeing, you know, true integration between a phone call and, you know, a follow-up reminder, you know, for an appointment, you know, and I think that's probably one of the next steps that needs to be done in this world of AI, that how do you integrate the two, or how do you track the two together as a call or a set of, you know, inquiries, right?
And realistically, a generative solution is perfectly well suited to analyze context around a call pretty effectively, and to do it very broadly, and to be able to summarize that and very rapidly. We've got at least one vendor who's had some of that stuff that's been out there for years, but now it's at a different level, right? Because we've moved on from NLP to generative, and our delivery times are dramatically faster. And when I say that, it's exponentially dramatically faster, right? So being able to query, just looking at Annie and the DNIS and using those as search keys in multiple databases, whether it's a CRM, an ordering system, other systems of record, is not a difficult proposition, and it's fast. And optimally, these things are meant to consume very large amounts of data and to summarize it. That they're optimized for that, right? So, as we go through this agent assist model, it could be a lot of different ways that plays out. Everybody's got a different vision for what AI means. I pretty much guarantee if we ask that question here, you get, 30 different answers, right? What does it mean to you? So, but that's okay, right? And this infrastructure will support any of those thoughts, right? As far as contact center implementation, and furthermore, enterprise-wide implementation as well, because it's not just, you can't just collect information just in the contact center. If you do it there, you really should be doing it in your R&D department as well. And there's more discussion to be had around that in a minute. So let me move on to what Dan Miller at Opus seemed to say. We're going from deer in the headlights to do it yourself this year. And he summarizes by, we're going to have these automation tools, we're going to have assistance tools, and we're going to have knowledge tools. So, and that's a fair summary. I think he's on to something with do it yourself, because it's like WebRTC. It's tough to make money at this stuff because it's so simple, right? So, but the disclaimer in that is that the simplicity is really at the front end of the process. You can get it 90% there, but that last 10% is a bear. Okay, and I'll give you in the next couple slides our discussion of that. In particular, what's easy? Can we, how do we build pump? Denise, she went through it. I think it was Denise that went through and had GPT create a picture of the SCTC meeting, and being able to create those prompts on the fly consistently, and to be able to get a response that's meaningful to your organization, your enterprise, it's pretty straightforward, right? It's really not crazy hard. I mean, it's just asking the machine, tell me what Steve Lane's needs are, right? And it uses, you can tune that to say, go look at 5 different places and tell me about Steve. So easy to do, right? And the chatbots, pretty straightforward. It's not hard. I think it's just a couple lines of code to embed it on a chatbot on your website. So it's not remarkably difficult. Even if that website is an internal facing only website, right? So not particularly difficult. And you can populate it with, say, training manuals or product literature, right? Pretty straightforward. You could take a company like General Mills, and for all the thousands of products that they make, you could probably put all the product documentation all the way down to research and development documents into those systems within 4 months, and have a corpus of data that covers everything from the day the company was founded in the 1870s all the way through here, right? So it's not particularly difficult to do that. Now, what do you do with it when you get it there, and how do you figure out whether that's right or not, or where it's giving you correct answers? It's another discussion. That's what I'm about to get into. Intent, sentiment, summary. That's pretty easy to do too, right? So that's referring to one of my partners that's got the checkbox thing, right? So they set that up within a matter of days or weeks. It's not a hard thing to do, and it's a native function of this generative technology, right? So those are the things that a lot of people are going to experiment with. I mean, any developer that's worth his salt within a day can have a chatbot up and running and show it to their boss in probably 2 to 3 hours.
So Chris, so to your point, right? And in 2024, all of us attending here, what do you think are the things the customers will grab onto? Easy sells, easy reaches, where they're not just listening, but they want to implement. So what is some of the low-hanging fruit out there, in your opinion?
Easy may not be the right strategy, and I do have a slide on that here in a moment.
Okay.
I've got like 10 more minutes, right?
No, you got 20, almost 20, 18.
Okay, all right. So So yeah, I'll get into that in just a moment. So
Okay.
Because I got a good segue into that, okay? So let me,
I'm all about segues, Chris. Go ahead.
okay, so, you know, these are the questions. So like I said, you know, a developer, 2 hours, you can get it running, you know? You say, hey, boss, look what I did, right? Great. Well, that boxes everybody in the organization now, because now some developer in IT has got a spark of an idea, okay? So if you start to see people, when you try to talk to them about it, and they seem like, yeah, we already got that handled, well, yeah, they do. You know, I mean, in a way, they've been able to demonstrate it and they can show it to their boss. The problems come with what we do at scale and with making sure that these things work. Like, you know, which API are you going to use? Whose product are you going to use? You know, GPT may be great today, or ChatGPT may be great today, but what if Google comes along with something in 4 months that's, you know, exponentially better? Or Q, for instance, with that Musk is working. So, you know, what are you going to do on that level? Okay. How do you optimize for speed and cost and performance? I don't know if y'all have looked at the prices on these things, but they can vary from incredibly stupidly cheap to incredibly stupidly expensive, depending on what your use case is. So there's a very broad, you know, and some have, you know, you can use the first 40,000 transactions are free, and then you get, I mean, you got to look at this from a recurring cost model perspective in a very big way, because it can be very big, right?
Mm-hmm.
So so how do you do that? How do you, yeah, boss, I can do this. We showed it to you, but it's gonna be $32 million a month to run it. Well, nobody's gonna tell you it's yes, you know. So other things, how do you handle variable costs? And what I mean by that is, what if you start experimenting and doing some R&D work around using, instead of just for a customer solution, customer-facing solution, but an R&D space-facing solution, which requires a whole different type or much longer prompts and so on to be able to work with. So there's variability there. How do you do quality assurance? How are you going to do that? You've got all the data that your company knows, or all the information that you heard, or intellectual institutional knowledge of a whole organization. Well, what do you do with that? And how do you know that there's no conflicts within that from a quality perspective? You don't. And there's ways to mitigate that, and there's, but again, it's not just like, hey boss, again, it's 2 hours, I guess it's just got to work, right? How are you going to evaluate performance? Well, if somebody calls up and says, and they got a baby crying in the background, and they picks up the wrong stuff, or thinks you said something else, you know, how do you account for that, right? So performance is going to be a whole different thing. Again, that, you know, 2 years from now, given processor speed and memory and good applications written, maybe this is not an issue, but right now it is. Okay, how do you do regression testing on that stuff? Okay, I mean, if you ask it the same question 4 times and it gives you 3 of the same answer, how do you fix that? Right? Mm-hmm. What happens when the model provider updates their model or updates their version? Well, you know, they wouldn't update it unless it affects the core performance of the solution. Mm-hmm. Well, if it's doing that, it's doing that to your data too. So, how do you know that going from version to version that you're going to get the same outputs? Okay. Adversarial testing is a very well traveled place for us in this industry. And you can literally set up an AI to test the AI. Okay. But how do you do that when you've got terabits worth of data, right? And so there's ways that these can be very efficient. There's ways that you can set up and it can be wrong. Okay. The security and compliance team, I mean, that's just going to be, you know, an ongoing discussion, right? Do you have regulatory issues, right? What if the API goes down? What's your fallback plan, right? I've got one.
No, I'm sorry, it'll never go down, Chris. You know, these things
Right.
are built on
I've got one
100% uptime.
customer that does 44 million hits a month on their website that are one-hit bounces. They want to try to mitigate that, right? So to get customers better information. Well, here we go. 44 million a month, right? That's a lot of meat and potatoes going down the line. So, you know, what are you going to do when it breaks? Who's going to support this, right? Do you hire people? I mean, if hiring was easy, everybody would do it, right? But you know, at the same time, it's a very difficult proposition from a long-term perspective, especially if you're just at that. Hey, boss, look what I did stage. Okay? So, so all of these have to be considered in a more or less what I would call a strategy document or a strategy process that says this is how we're going to solve for every one of these problems, and depending on the organization, probably a couple more, right? So so there is a lot of simplicity out there. There is also a lot of complexity, and you know, I can understand where Dan is coming from over there at Opus. But I think if it does go to the DIY this year, then next year it's going to swing back to the I need help, right? Because all these things are going to come into play. And when you're dealing with something as valuable as the institutional knowledge of a large corporation, you know, you might want to treat it with a little bit of respect on that level. Right?
So Chris, Blair has a question. Blair?
Hey, Blair.
Oh, hey there. Yeah, I was just wondering about training, and not training the models, but training the agents. Do you see companies and call centers that are actually deploying the stuff, spending the time and resources on properly training their agents, not only on how to use it, but also the stuff around it, like it's not going to take your job, it's going to be there to help you. Because I see so many companies just throwing this out and the agents are, you know, kind of overwhelmed.
Yeah, and there's so a couple comments on training and training materials in particular. Training materials are sort of a gold mine for this technology, right? So typically, you know, it's going to be multiple megabits. It's not going to be terabits worth of information, and it's right on point for the training process, right? What my customers are, there's not one agent assist tool that we've ever built where we haven't first asked for training materials. So that's number one. Number two, being able to you know, that part of the challenge is when and I said this earlier, when you say AI, everybody thinks it's a different thing. So that doesn't mean just because you're a contact center, everybody thinks alike. They don't, right? Some of them can't, you know, they really have trouble connecting the dots, and we all would, right? Because here's a new technology where I say, you know, ship batteries, and the machine will go off and execute a process to ship those batteries and show you the screens that you can click through to be able to make it happen. You know, those are very complex solutions. If it's just for, say, information or agent assistance, like how do I ship batteries, and it'll come back with a well-formed set of instructions to do just that. Okay, including screenshots if you choose to include those in that corpus of data. So, and many of our, and the last comment is many of my customers, when it comes to training, are looking at reducing the amount of training that they're doing long term. Right now, they're not doing anything. They're still training their people the same way. But over time, they think that they can get away with compressing those classes.
Mm.
Some training may take 2 or 4 months, right? Depending on, you know, how long your onboarding process is. So does that answer your question?
Kind of. I'm just thinking that, you know, a lot of the agents, when you talk to them, they're really nervous about using AI, you know, one, using it, and two, that it's going to replace their jobs.
Right.
And that they're not, you know, they're not being upskilled and AI is just going to replace them. And, you know, like whether it's Agent Assist or some of these other capabilities, a lot of companies are just throwing it out there and not spending the time and money. And I was just reading an article that, you know, some companies, they don't have the training budgets for training their agents in the call centers. And so I'm just thinking that this is going to have to be really a new, something that companies are really going to have to spend time and money on in addition to the AI tools and technologies, is really getting the agents feeling comfortable with this.
I absolutely agree with you. And I think that there's an MIT study that was done over at Microsoft. And they saw an overall, with just an Agent Assist tool in the Microsoft 365 contact center software support, they saw a 14% improvement in productivity overall. However, with regard to their lower skilled agents, what they observed was a faster time to proficiency with the use of the AI. And a comment about life cycle, you know, we all talk about like my kids, they won't know privacy the way that we knew privacy, right? They just won't. But in a contact center, you know, your generation in a contact center is about every 2 years, 2 to 4 years. Right? You know, maybe in medical, you'll see a 14% or 15% attrition rate, but rarely do you see anything that's below that. Most, you know, I've seen, you know, some hotel chains that rotate their staff 2 times a year, right? So there is a sort of socialization model for that, and I think that we're starting that process now.
Mm.
So,
Chris, another question from Sandy. Thanks. I hope that helps there, Blair. Sandy, go ahead.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Sure.
thanks. Yeah, it's just a sort of general one out there. You mentioned at the beginning, Steve, about the British Post Office, which was quite timely, really. I don't know if you've heard about the biggest scandal to hit our post office, and which has actually led to the biggest miscarriage of justice in UK history, which revolves around the Fujitsu Horizon system, which has led to a massive mistrust of IT systems in general. And I think this is a hurdle, certainly in the UK, that is going to be quite difficult to overcome, because there are issues with AI that you've covered really well there, Chris. And that's if you ask the same question 2 or 3 times, you could get a different answer every time. When is it actually going to be ready to be trustworthy? Just in the light of some of the things that have happened recently.
And let me to give you some perspective onto that, it's just dovetails right into this slide. And it's, you know, where do you start and how do you correct for those errors? And the key here is curate. I mean, you've got to you've got to curate your content, and in a contact center, you've got scale to be able to do that. Do you have time, or do you have the initiative to pay your people to do that for you? Because they're the ones that have to correct. So if, say, for instance, the system, they do a query and it comes back with the wrong answer, they're part of that curation process where they've got to say, hey, that's wrong. And you've got to flag that so that can be managed and corrected, right? And interestingly enough, like I said, at scale, so if I've got 4,000 people in my contact center, it really, from a content and from a correctness perspective, say for instance, if I were to do that for 2 to 4 months, I could have a very, very highly accurate assemblage of that institutional knowledge.
Yeah.
Right? Now, what do you do with it from there? It's your choice. But the first thing you got to do is get it into a platform, and then you got to correct it. And we in the contact center business are uniquely positioned to be able to have a staff of that could be readily leveraged to do that. And maybe you just use a group of maybe your most senior agents. Maybe that's only 400 people out of the 4,000, but that's still very valid in terms of how that gets done and how it gets executed. Because once that corpus of data is complete and you deem it 99% accurate because you just put 400,000 man hours into it, you got a pretty good. That's a valuable piece of information. And you can automate anything from there that can be automated. And that's a big caveat, that can be automated, right? Not everything can be automated, which gets back to Blair's point. This still is not going to be. You're not going to eliminate contact centers unless your culture deems that you can get away with that. I think Frontier Airlines is trying that out right now. I haven't heard any updates, but I don't fly them. So, but that's just the way it is, So, the next, I just want to make one final comment here, and this is sort of the next phase. Basically, and whether it's Allman or Reed, Hoffman, they're really looking at moving towards a personal assistant type agent software that we can leverage in the future. So we'll see a lot of big especially for knowledge workers. We'll see a lot of new stuff in the next year or so, tying everybody's email, voicemail, chat, Teams, scheduling, all that's going to be pulled together into one personal agent that has been talked about for 30 years, right? But now I think we've got some of the tools to be able to do it, and the money between these two guys, they got tons of dough to develop that stuff. So, so that's pretty much where I see it. And I think where the market is probably being pulled in that direction. So.
And then you have a closing slide, right? I think, Chris.
Yeah, I do. So.
There you go.
There you go. So Theodore Roosevelt, and I can summarize this by sometimes you got to do something even if it's wrong. You just got to do it, and that's I think where we are. You'll see a lot of experimentation, and real money will go into it in some cases. I don't think we'll see real scale until, and we've got a hospital system that's starting to scale up right now, and it's working, right? So we'll see if we can. Right now we're just it's like every 7th call gets handled, but we'll see what happens.
Excellent. Well, Chris, thanks for your time as always, and
thank you.
Fantastic education. I love the slides. I love the content, and again, for all of us that are members, replay is available for all of you, of course. So thanks, and we will see you again next week. And Chris, again, a big thank you to you and everybody for being on.
Okay, thanks again.
Thanks, Chris.
Take care, everybody.
Thanks very much. Thank you.
Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.